This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, Housing Committee. The time is 2:02, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Make sure that we're respecting your time today and your calendar because I know just how busy all of you guys are. So we'll get started here now. So today's meeting will be pretty similar to last meeting in that it's going to rely heavily on participation. So please make sure that your microphone is working and that your camera is available if possible. We'd really love to see your faces. We know that it's a collaborative environment, but it can be kind of tough over this virtual space. So if you do have access to your camera, please feel free to turn it on. We'd love to see you today. This meeting should be a little bit quicker than some of the last ones, which should give you back some of your time. So fingers crossed there that we work quickly and efficiently. But I'd like to go ahead and first give a big warm welcome to some of the new faces and names that we see here today. James McClinton with Tarrant County Community Development, Wendy Sosa with Cook Children's, Sarah Villanueva with MHMR of Tarrant County, and Kelly Kaiser with United Way of Tarrant County. We're looking forward to having you on the committee. We're especially looking forward to your feedback and expertise and participation as we really get into the nitty-gritty of this housing committee work today. So we'll go ahead and start off with a brief recap of our last meeting, which was on May 11th. We do meet the second Wednesday of every month at 2 p.m. The first thing that we did was we talked about policy. What makes a good policy versus what makes a bad policy? But we recognize that those terms, good and bad, are pretty subjective, so we want to reframe our question of, is this a good policy or is this a bad policy, into what makes this policy equitable. So those equitable policies, those are the ones that offer the long-term solutions that prevent the negative outcomes in the future, specifically including how burdens and benefits are reallocated, right? We also discussed the unintended consequences of race-neutral policy, which sounds simple on the surface level, but those race-neutral policies often trigger implicit bias. And implicit bias is a form of bias that occurs automatically and unintentionally. Some examples of race-neutral policies that we shared in the last meeting that kind of exclude or impact specific racial groups or specific population groups include, internal company policies that prevent the hiring of individuals with felony convictions, only providing literature in English and in Spanish, and using historically redlined neighborhoods as comparison grounds for the appraisal process. Next, we talked about equity indicators, what they are, how they're measured, and which ones are most important in our work. So we developed 6 equity indicators that we're going to be focusing on. We may end up adding more in the future if our current grant that we're working on becomes county funded at some point. So the 6 that we're sticking with are affordability, accessibility, homelessness, redlining and gentrification, strategic investments, and impact of developments. So when the time comes, we'll actually be using the scoring system that was developed by CUNY's Institute for State and Local Governance, which is quite detailed, so it'll be a learning curve to use, but we'll work together and figure out how to score these things properly. Lastly, we brainstormed some equity indicator measurements, which are the measurements that we're going to use to measure those 6 things that I had just stated. We did that in Padlet, and then we prioritized those measures by interest, feasibility, and expected impact. So pictured here, it's a little chaotic, but this is the mark of good brainstorming. It shows the prioritized list of measurements for our 6 equity indicators. These measurements highlighted in yellow were identified as being high priority. So I'll give y'all a minute to look these over, especially since we have a few new faces in here today, or in case you haven't already seen them or need a quick refresher from our last meeting. So I'm going to hop off of the mic for just a second and give you guys some time to read. If y'all ever need to zoom in, because I have been told before that I make my font really small, hover over the shared screen and zoom in using your like little scroll bar on your mouse, and that'll help. So after looking at these yellow highlighted measures, do you have any questions, comments, feedback based on these measures as they are? If not, we'll push through. Awesome. Okay, so here in just a few minutes, we'll actually be reviewing the recommendations. This will be the meat and potatoes of this meeting, is reviewing those recommendations that are based off of these prioritized measures. So keep this in mind. If you'd like a copy of this after the meeting, please let me know. I'd be happy to send it to you, but you will be getting copies of the actual recommendations, which will have these same measurements included in it. So we're going to move into the next section of the meeting, which this is going to be the part that's really crucial to add your thoughts and share your expertise and experiences. These recommendations that we're going to present today are going to be included in our housing equity plan, or at least our portion of the overall Tarrant County equity plan, and it'll serve as a guideline in our goal setting process for the remainder of this grant period. So pictured here, as promised, is the policy review framework that we'll be using as we draft our new policies and or review current ones. So this framework is awaiting approval, so it's like 95%, not 100%. So if you guys see some small changes in the final version, please do not be surprised, but this is what it'll look similar to, and the majority of the questions will stay the same. We have this abbreviated version pictured here, and then one that's like 2.5 pages full of guiding considerations and questions. So we'll be applying that equity lens to each section of our policy planning and intervention process, asking ourselves each of the questions in that guiding considerations column. So if you have any questions about the framework, please reach out to Dr. Wingate. She is on vacation this week, so she will get back to you on Tuesday when she returns. But this is the framework that we'll begin using once it's been fully approved and once we actually start that drafting process. So as we selected our measurements, we had to keep in mind the 3 types of recommendations that we would be making: short-term, medium-term, and long-term. The short-term recommendations are those that can be drafted, publicized, and completed. Completed is the key word within this COVID-19 grant timeline. The medium-term and long-term recommendations are those that can be drafted and publicized during the COVID-19 grant timeline, but will likely take much longer to complete than just within the current timeline or what that timeline allows. Maggie says, "I love this framework. Is it something that can be used across multiple challenges like housing, homelessness, infrastructure, and mobility?" Yes, absolutely. We're going to get there. So a bit of background information on our COVID-19 grant, since I've been mentioning it quite a bit, and I don't think that we've actually touched on the inner workings or at least the timeline of this grant. So the grant period is scheduled to end May 31st of 2023. Tarrant County Public Health leadership, though, is working diligently to secure a no-cost extension, which could be anywhere from like 3 months up to a full year past that original deadline. So our timeline could be May of next year or May of 2024 or really anything in between. We won't really know until, I believe they said early fall of this year, what that end date is going to look like for us. So that's why it's really imperative for us in this process to diversify our recommendations, because we really don't know how long we'll have to complete all the components in this initial round, but we can at least spread the word and establish these goals to keep the recommendations on that general timeline. And now that the timeline is clear, recommendations, categories are clear, the short, medium, and long term, we'll go ahead and spend as I said, the remainder of the meeting actually reading through these recommendations. So I'm going to pull up a document that includes all the recommendations for each equity indicator based on the prioritized measurements from the last meeting. And this is that document that you guys had received on Monday attached to the meeting reminder email. In this document, we'll be able to move things around, add new recommendations, adjust existing recommendations, or really anything else that you guys may deem necessary. I will say though, full disclosure, most of these recommendations were, well, they were all written by me, but they were based on housing research that I have done and informal conversations that I've had with local housing officials and in some capacity in this committee as well. So I am not a subject matter expert, so I'm likely missing some key components or dreaming unfeasible dreams. So please jump in with your feedback. You guys know the ins and outs of housing. I know that the city of Arlington is doing some really big things with their new lot size zoning. So y'all jump in. You are the experts. Tell me where I'm wrong, and we'll restructure these things and really get the ball rolling on this work. So just one second,
Hey,
and
I'm going to jump in. This is Mindy Cochran with Arlington. Just real quick, the city hasn't done anything yet with their lot sizes and zoning. They're having a series of town hall meetings to talk about residential infill as an option. And there's a huge segment of our public that's not happy with the way it's currently drafted. So I want to make sure that publicly that you all know, and as this conversation continues, that there is nothing has been approved because there's grave concerns it's just getting shoved through without sufficient public input. So just FYI.
definitely, and thanks for the update. I believe it was, oh, I don't know if they're in here. I want to say they are, but last meeting, it was brought up that you guys were going to be starting those community listening sessions. So I do apologize that I misspoke in the distribution of that information, but it's projects like that that we want to take into consideration as we're reviewing these recommendations, right? Because this equity plan and these recommendations are going to be partnership based. These are not necessarily new recommendations, and many of them might be things that people are already doing at the organizational or city level. So that's where we really need the input, is knowing what's feasible, what's not, what's being done, what's worked, what hasn't. So pictured here on the screen is our first little set of recommendations about redlining and gentrification. So I'm going to hop off of the mic real fast, let you guys read these in silence, and then feel free to jump on and offer any suggestions. Up on here, I have a few little keys. If we move something to a new term, we're going to italicize it. Something totally new will be highlighted, adjusted in red, and removed as a strike through. That way we can keep track of everything that's going on today. So here we go. All right. Any quick thoughts, opinions, adjustments that you guys can think of with everything that's pictured here? I saw in the chat, Amy asked who would apply for the Choice Neighborhood Implementation Grant. City of Worth has received one. That is awesome. These guidelines are going to be things that we can do at organizational levels, city levels, and the county level. So anybody who would be interested at any of those levels and applying for some of these things are, we can kind of direct it towards them. It'd be really cool to have this, City of Fort Worth already has this. It'd be cool if the City of Arlington got it, all the other cities, major cities in Tarrant County, and then potentially Tarrant County if they're able to be considered in those funding decisions.
Historically, this is Mindy again. Historically, Choice Neighborhood, there needed to be a public housing component. Now, it's been a long time since I've looked at the Choice Neighborhood grant application, but Arlington historically could not apply for it because it was so heavy connected to public housing, and we have no public housing. So that would probably be the same for a lot of the cities in Tarrant County.
Okay. Let's see, I'm trying to read the comments as they're coming in. City of Fort Worth is setting up clinics in the fall on the topic of airship properties. Amy, that is awesome. Let's see, the CNI grant is to transform public housing projects only. Yep, that's what Mindy was just saying too. Let's see, what am I missing? Okay, are there any adjustments or things that we need to just straight up take off of this section?
This is Mindy again. Under the short term, when you're talking about home sales, I think when you're looking at home sales, it would be important to include, are they being sold to an individual or to a corporate owner? And or like when they do change ownership, are they getting a homestead exemption or are they not, meaning they're probably being used for rental? I'd be curious to see if we see a shift in home ownership of single family to renter or corporate owned. And then the data on the home values, you need to establish a baseline you're going to compare it to, like from what year to the current year, or are you talking about current year future, going forward? And then also, I think it'd be important to add a foreclosure, track foreclosures as prices are going up and up and property taxes are going up and up. That gentrification, some folks are not going to be able to afford to stay in their homes, and we may start seeing an uptick in foreclosure rates.
Oh, I
Awesome.
echo. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to ask, Mindy, I know you said like 3 or 4 things in that, and I think I only got 3 of them.
Sorry.
Is there one more that I'm missing?
Let's see, sale to business or individuals. What's the time frame on collecting data on home values to compare them to? Like, are you going to compare home values from 5 years ago to current, or are you comparing current to 12 months from now?
So that's something that we want to start tracking, at least at the county level using the equity lens. So these are things that we can start tracking immediately and putting all those measures into place. So these ones don't have a timeline. These are going to be indefinite data collection sources. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Okay.
And then I think that some of that could, if you're comparing, like 45% of properties in Tarrant County that were sold in 2021 were sold to a business versus an individual. So there's also about half of those were sold with the intent, or I'm sorry, half of those were of what they called poor quality, and I don't know what how they measured that it was poor quality. So I'd be curious to see if those that are sold to corporate investors are those ones that had code enforcement violations. So is the poor or older dilapidated housing stock being sold to investors to be used as rental property for lower income families, or are they buying those and fixing them up?
Perfect.
Because
I'll find a way to phrase that.
Fight the corporate investor. But if they're fixing up our neighborhoods, then maybe we don't want to fight them as hard.
Yeah, great point. Maggie, sorry I cut you off. If you want to.
Oh, you're good.
No, no, you're perfect. I just wanted to one echo what Mindy was saying because I think those are also really fantastic points. I had just seen something recently about how it was a bunch of investors that were buying single family and it wasn't single family to single family transfer, which is super concerning. The other thing that I think is really interesting is I've been looking at some data recently about home ownership and race. And like if you look at a like, and I can I share this with you just in the chat through like a private one. But there's a map overlapping homeownership and race, and you can see that the majority of white homeowners are outside of the central cities, and so they're really on the outskirts of Tarrant County. And so I think that's a really interesting visual. And happy to drop that whole thing in the chat anyway if anybody wants to see it. But I just feel like that's something we need to be talking about. And it ties back, I think, to some of the data that you're collecting. But we've got that and can absolutely share that and run it for any race.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I can also include that link in the follow-up email
That's perfect.
with your
Yeah.
permission. Okay, perfect. And then in terms of the homeownership rate, so that one was both listed in redlining and gentrification and in accessibility, but I tossed it over to accessibility because we built out a few extra things in there.
Okay,
So we're
cool.
gonna get to that one, I promise.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you guys. Okay, we're gonna move past this one. If y'all think of anything, feel free to tell me to come back to it. We're moving on to strategic investments. This one's a little bit shorter. Y'all take a moment to read over and then we'll go into feedback time. All right, anything to add, change, or remove under strategic investments?
I think it's going to be a challenge to match city RFPs to county verbiage because there's different needs in a city like Fort Worth than there is in a city such as, for example, Hearst. So I think that, the city of Fort Worth might want a percentage of PSH units, and the city of Hearst or Watauga is not necessarily going to need that. And they may disincentivize investment in
Yeah.
those. I
And
think that we have unique problems and we need unique solutions.
I was going to say that exact same thing. And I think like too, so location really, really matters, right? And so if you're talking about senior housing, that location, maybe if you're going to be strategic about that's going to be in a different part of the county, perhaps. It's going to be based on data of where you might have seniors that are cost burdened or whatever. But that's going to be different than family that needs to be close to a school or that need to be access to services. And so I think just to keep that in mind, because we do not have a robust transportation system, and so we need to be able to make sure that people can still get where they need to be and access to services and amenities that they need and jobs, et cetera, in order to be successful.
Awesome. Thank you both for your feedback. I went ahead and crossed off the match city RFPs. If something comes up in a city that falls, city, town, any sort of local government that falls under Tarrant County ever wants to utilize the same verbiage, then we just make it an opportunity for them that way, but we don't enforce it. Amy says Fort Worth hired Joe M. I'm not going to try to pronounce the last name, from Urban 3 to do a study of tax assessment and productivity by neighborhood. Will likely show older, diverse neighborhoods more productive than suburban, exurban neighborhoods. Very interesting. And she also says a good strategic investment is to invest in existing SF, owner occupied home, low income owners with home repair programs. Maggie says she loves home repair programs. They're expanding to include emergency repairs soon because not everybody needs or wants an overhaul. Okay, so we'll add what Amy has says. Invest in existing single-family homes with home repair programs. Awesome. Anything else on this one, strategic investments?
This is Mindy again, and I've got to hop off in about 5 minutes, but I would add, if you're doing an RFP for housing, for affordable housing especially, that you are really careful how you define affordable housing. We're seeing in Arlington, and I know in some areas throughout the county as well, is that you sign a lease and your rent's $1,000, right? And if you're being supported by a voucher, your voucher is going to consider rent and utilities as your total housing cost. But what the voucher or subsidy won't consider, and what the tenant's being charged, is $89 tech fee, $25 valet trash fee, all these mandatory fees that can add up to $200, $300, $400 sometimes. It's called affordable housing, but it's truly not. Those families are going to be 50% cost burden when they get in there, even if they're using a Section 8 voucher, because of all these mandatory costs. And I think we're also, if you have PFC type projects, you're going to see that there as well. So just as a precaution, to make sure we're really carefully defining and making sure we're actually getting affordable housing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Mindy, if you have to jump off before you speak again, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate your input. And you'll get a copy of this as well. So if you see anything else from your perspective in City of Arlington that needs to be adjusted, amended, or straight up taken off, please feel free to shoot me an email with all of your corrections. Kelly says, as a person on the front lines of need for disabled and elderly adults, the need for home repairs are staggering, and finding funding for these are imperative to keep them independent. I love that. Find a way to get that in there, I promise. And then Amy, speaking to Mindy, says that they're trying to focus their HFC funding on 0 to 30 and 30 to 50 AMI housing and not workforce.
Awesome.
All right, we're going to move on to impact of developments. Give y'all a quick second to look over.
While they're reading, I want to give you one more thing to think about. I'm not really sure where it fits in here, but one of the things that we're experiencing is that to use our home dollars for our home repair programs, there's a limit that HUD has, the value of the home. If it's over a certain value, can't remember what it is, 223D or something like that. If it's over that value, then it's not eligible for any home funds. So you've got this very low income family, and they're living in this house that 5 years ago, was a $100,000 home, and now it's a $200,000 home, and it's not eligible for repair. So I think that's something that maybe as a region we could take that on and do a market study, because you can do some type of a study in lieu of using HUD's defined 223D limit or whatever that limit is. So.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great data point to add into our affordability section. I believe I talk about some repairs in that section as well, and identifying new funding sources, but that seems like it would fit in perfectly. Kelly says that she had a family have that happen recently and that they're not eligible. Amy says, consider incentives like density bonuses for providing affordability, less than 80% AMI, preferably less than 60% AMI. Amy, do you feel like that would fall under a short-term or medium-term or long-term goal or recommendation?
Probably medium term, because it would take some time to change that policy in the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
This is Donna. In addition to the comment about the density bonuses, it could be a medium. Also, is the creation of neighborhood empowerment zones. I know Fort Worth is really good about that, and they go back and forth about, which ones are considered NESs and which ones weren't. But I don't think all cities do that. And I think incentives could be provided for not only developing houses housing in these areas, but for developers who are creating housing to serve low income, they would get, waivers of fees and, things like that. So that would help them decrease their costs, which would hopefully increase the affordability.
That's super interesting. I hadn't heard about these neighborhood empowerment zones yet. So thank you for sharing. Tossed that on there under incentivizing affordability. In the comments, Maggie says she always forgets about NEZ. Amy says, shout out to Tarrant County HFC, who has partnered with Fort Worth HFC on 4% tax credit deals. This has been a great resource for the city. And Kelly says, yes, we definitely need to see more 4% deals. All right, anything else on impact of developments for right now? Okay, we'll go ahead and slide down to accessibility. Thanks so much, Mindy, for being here. We appreciate your input. All right, any feedback on the accessibility recommendations?
We have under long-term incentivized ADUs. I think we need to start with allowing ADUs because, there's a lot of cities that don't allow that. So allow and incentivize would be good. But there's just a lot of policies and a lot of, I guess, negative feedback that we've gotten from, on ADUs. And I think they're a great resource for affordable housing.
I second that, Dawn. I'm so glad you brought that up. And AARP, and I can't remember if I mentioned this before or not. So AARP is like not your grandma's AARP. Like, let me just be 100% clear. Like, the way that they've been looking at livable communities is awesome. And they have this fantastic guide called the ABCs of ADUs that you can print off. And it gives a ton of information that's really, really helpful in like how you can talk about ADUs. So yeah, Donna's right on. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yes, agreed. Thank you. I'm creating that incentivize ADUs as its own goal. So that's the beauty of this process is things that you deem really important may not have been things that I found in my research, and I mean other way around. So I appreciate you guys coming in and really sharing your expertise with this. So thank you. We'll find a way to build some recommendations off of that being an equity indicator measure. And Maggie, I'll include that AARP resource link in the follow-up email.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Anything else on accessibility? I know I just blocked the screen by doing that, but anything else on accessibility? All right, we're going to move down to affordability. This one's kind of long, so I'm just going to show as much as I can. We'll collapse these sections for now. Oopsies. Sorry, y'all. We won't do that because it messes up the formatting. All right, y'all just look over short term and most of medium term, and then once we go through these, I'll scroll down a little bit and we'll look at the long term. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. Oh, it was only one thing under long term. You guys, I'm sorry. There's a lot of things to keep track of in this document today. Okay, any feedback on affordability? Amy says, not a fan of education, kind of blaming poor folks. I think down payment assistance programs and assistance with home buying process is far more effective.
I would also love to see, I have not seen as much of a conversation. I've seen a lot of conversations around lowering the rent, but not so much about how we might think differently about raising the incomes. And so I would just like to see, I think you need both. So I think you need to be having both of those conversations because it's not one versus the other one. But I would love to see how we might tie workforce development into it as well.
Okay, Amy and Maggie, do y'all have recommendations on where to put those items or what is on here currently to change?
I don't know if that potentially could go under financial literacy. Maybe. It feels kind of weird for it living there. What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, I think you create another program where it's another medium term main point that would be, job creation and
Yeah.
employment assistance of some sort. That's a better way.
Yeah, I like that. We could even get super fun and create. So Harris County has been doing, was it Harris County? Dang, maybe it wasn't there. So there was one county that was looking, I'll try and figure out which one it was, where they were tying economic development incentive programs to housing, and it was really super cool. So let me see if I can find something on that, because I think that would be another awesome thing. So it'd be like, basically, we can help you get the housing built for your employees that, that you're trying to bring in for said company or whatever. So just a thought. Or, partnering, just thinking about how you might tie housing and economic development and workforce development all together.
Yeah,
Maggie,
there's
you're
a lot
on
of research about locating, I'm sorry, I interrupted somebody. There's a lot of research on the locations of housing versus jobs. And when I think of things like Alliance, there's not a lot of affordable housing in North Fort Worth, but there's a lot of jobs up there.
Yes. So true.
I think there needs to be a better link between concentration of jobs and concentration of affordable housing.
Yeah, I would love that so much.
concentration of jobs versus concentration of affordable housing. Perfect. Maggie, you were talking about, I'm sorry, Amy, go ahead.
I would like to add, down payment assistance programs, if we can. Those have been really, really effective in helping people achieve a first home. And we do that with our home funds at the city. And I think Arlington has a similar program, perhaps.
I do not know. I think they do. Mindy dropped off, so I don't know. Donna would know for sure. And I know the county used to, but we don't anymore. Donna?
Yeah, Housing Channel administers the Arlington Homebuyer Assistance Program. One question I had was under let's see, what did it say? Allowable housing product types and size. I don't understand that first bullet. Obviously I think the idea behind that is to allow, smaller size lots versus like, I don't really understand that one. Is that like because of like, say, some counties require minimum 1 acre sites or something like that? Is that where that came from?
Yes, and so I was trying to utilize I believe it was you, Donna, who last meeting had introduced the topic of what Mindy corrected me on, the um, upcoming, well, I guess community listening sessions at this point, but any upcoming changes to their lot size requirements to allow for smaller houses to be built on smaller plots of land,
Yeah.
just to make it more accessible. So I probably worded it really poorly there. So if you have a better way of wording it, please let me know and I'll change it right here.
I don't think it's a sale requirement. It's just a lot size requirement, allowing, smaller lot sizes.
And I think it does kind of bleed into a fair housing issue. And so I think depending on how active we wanted to get in that space, but definitely of raising the alarm. Because there was one city who will remain nameless that several years ago we were like, hey, some of your requirements for housing is that's a fair housing problem. It's going to be and they were like, well, it hasn't been a problem in the past. It's like, okay, well, just letting you know.
And then one thing I think we should add is, the cities need to utilize their resources and focus them on affordable housing development. So, for instance, you've got tax foreclosed houses and lots. I think there should be a first look program for CHODOs or for community developers who are building affordable housing to have access to those before they go to the open market to, i.e. investors. They have those tools and they really need to focus those tools to create and to fill that gap in the market where we can't compete with investors. So if they utilize the resources they have and focus those to community housing developers, we can start having more of a balance.
Perfect. And I am taking notes of all the things that you guys are saying if they're not currently on the indicator that we're looking at on the screen. So I'll be going back through after this meeting and updating everything, trying to find places to fill in your recommendations. So Donna, while it's not on the screen right now, it will end up being on the screen for you when it gets sent over the post-meeting materials email.
Sure, that's fine. I'm just talking. I'm just brainstorming.
That's good. That's what we need. Maggie had mentioned something earlier about the connection between housing and economic development, and it's funny you ask. We are merging those committees. The Economic Development Committee technically does not exist yet, but we don't need to talk about that. So they're going to be connecting over the next few months. So it'll be housing and economic development. So anything that has to deal with economic development, toss it in here. We'll add some of those recommendations too. Okay, I'm going to hop on over to homelessness. This is the last indicator that we have to cover today. any feedback on the homelessness recommendations? And now you will see that there are far fewer homelessness recommendations than any of the other equity indicators. And I think what we've determined through our first two meetings was that affordability and accessibility, and then trying to figure out how and why we're investing, are some of the biggest problems right now. So if you think of anything else that needs to be added to homelessness, please do share. I know it's a short list.
I just want to say I would love to see places outside of Arlington and Fort Worth take on some homelessness housing.
Amen.
Just saying.
I know.
I
Why
don't
is it
know.
just the big cities? I don't understand that.
Hold up. We're just
Maggie,
slow. We're not as fast as y'all, but I promise it's coming. It's coming.
We'll add building homeless shelters in smaller cities for now as the interim.
Well,
and I wouldn't even say homeless shelters. I would say permanent supportive housing, because we want to get people out of shelters and into houses.
Is it all PSH though? So that's where I don't know, I get a little squirmish about all the PSH. Because I think there's some other spaces where, maybe it's not, sorry, I just put something in my mouth. Like where it might make more sense for something else. And obviously we can figure all of that out, but I will say this. I will say it's definitely something that we're looking at and considering. And as far as development goes, yes, and Tarrant County, our funds, that's typically outside of the cities of Fort Worth and Arlington. So it's just based on the needs of those particular communities because they're all different. So there you go.
Perfect. Thank you, Donna and Maggie. Anything else on homelessness before we start to wrap up today? Okay, we're going to go ahead and close out of that and move back on over to our PowerPoint. We just got a few quick things to cover before we're done here today. So pictured here is a community listening sessions map. So over the next few months, specifically the summer months, the health equity team will be conducting community listening sessions in these 9 health equity zones that you see here. The numbers are totally arbitrary. They're just top to bottom, left to right. They don't mean anything specific. The zones in yellow represent zip codes with high rates of COVID-19, low rates of COVID vaccinations, and high SVI, which is social vulnerability indices. The zones in blue have been additional areas of interest in terms of high levels of health disparities and then high levels of barriers to everyday goods and services. So the health equity team will be hosting multiple sessions within each of these health equity zones at different points throughout the grant life cycle. We're in the process of reaching out to community institutions to secure meeting spaces. We're pretty flexible on dates and times, but we really are trying to be mindful of the populations that we're trying to reach. So we're taking childcare, transportation, non-traditional work schedules into account as we start to plan these sessions. So if you or your organization is interested in attending or sponsoring or even hosting one of these listening sessions at your location, please let us know. Or if you can get us connected to somebody who has a good location, please let us know.
Kylie, do you know the organization Politicit?
I have not heard of them.
I mentioned Politicit because, and they partnered with CTL in the past, I believe, to provide childcare in some cases for either public meetings or for voting, so parents can go vote. And I am happy to give you their executive director's contact information. She's delightful.
Yes, that would be wonderful. And if you have that, and then anybody else who wants to participate or offer space, please reach out to Tanya. Her information is actually going to be on the next screen, so everything will go to her because Our last item of business is to connect you guys with our new points of contact. This is my last housing committee meeting that I will be hosting. I have been promoted into a new role within Tarrant County Public Health. So I will be leaving you guys in the very capable hands of Tanya. So she's going to be over the Housing and Economic Development Committee and then the Health Committee. So Tanya and Dr. Wingate are going to be kind of co-leading this committee and will continue to lead the group as this equity plan is developed. I have absolutely loved my time with you guys and fully intend on being perhaps overly active as a committee member, but I'm looking forward to working alongside of you guys as a just committee member in my next role. So Tanya's contact information is included on the screen. I'll also send it in the follow-up email. And any questions that you have about housing, you're welcome to send them to me, but come Monday the 13th, they'll all go to Tanya. Okay, real fast. I'm going to open it up to you guys. The time is 2:54, so if you don't have anything to say, we'll close. But if not, feel free to hop on the mic and add any additional thoughts, comments, concerns, or questions.
Just that you've done an amazing job, and I'm super excited that you got promoted. Very well done and very well deserved.
Thank you, Maggie. All right, if nobody else has anything, we'll go ahead and be done for today. Thank you so much for your participation and your brainstorming. I feel like we've made a really solid dent in this work, and I'm excited to continue the discussion again as a housing committee member next time at our next meeting, which is scheduled for Wednesday, July 13th at 2 p.m. Thanks for coming and have an awesome afternoon.